Good evening. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy. I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the Blessed Noble and Self-Awakened One. I thought this evening we'd change tack a little bit. This is the Discourse of Jivaka. Now, Jivaka, it seems, was found on a rubbish heap by a certain prince and was brought up. He went off to a university in Takasila, which was at that time very famous up in present-day Pakistan, part of the old Greek Empire, I think. And he became a doctor, a very successful doctor. So let's see what this is about. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the mango grove of Jivaka Kumbharabacha. Now, the Rajagaha, remember, is Rajgir, the city of the king, which is where Bimbisara, one of his great supporters, Buddha's great supporters, lived. So that was the country right on the Ganges, Varanasi, that sort of area. And Jivaka by this time has become quite rich, so he owns a mango grove. Jivaka went to see the Blessed One and paid homage, sat to one side and said, Venerable Sir, I've heard this. They slaughter living beings for the recluse Gautama. The recluse Gautama knowingly eats meat prepared for him from animals killed for his sake. Do these speak as you say? Do those who speak thus say what has been said by the Blessed One and not misrepresent him? And then there's this lovely sentence, which we had these past times. Do they explain in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from their assertions? I can't imagine the ordinary person saying that. Jivaka, those who speak thus do not say what has been said by me, but misrepresent me with what is untrue and contrary to fact. I say there are 3 instances in which meat should not be eaten: when it is seen, heard, or suspected that the living being has been slaughtered for a monastic. So now he's talking about rules for monastics. I say that meat should not be eaten on these 3 instances. I say there are 3 instances in which meat can be eaten: when it is not seen, not heard, not suspected that the living being has been slaughtered for the bhikkhu or the monastic. And I say that meat may be eaten in these 3 instances. So now there we have a sort of basic attitude to meat eating. Now, we have to remember that in the Buddha's time, there were famines. And when there was a famine, you killed your livestock, you know. It also really shows the Buddha as the great pragmatist. If he had absolutely said that everybody had to be vegetarian who followed him, then it'd be very difficult to spread the Dharma to people who live in desert regions or up in the Arctic. I mean, what do you say to an Inuit, you know? Eat snow. So there's something about the Buddha that never takes him towards an idealism. And the reason is that the world is relative. You can't make absolute laws in a relative universe. So it's not thou shalt not kill. It's I undertake the training rule not to kill living beings, right? So there's always this understanding in the Buddha that there are times when obvious rules, moral laws, have to be, shall we say, understood for a greater purpose. have to be put aside for a greater purpose. I remember, you know, at school, they used to give you these little problems like, if you're starving, would it be right to steal food, you see? I think most people would say yes, except from somebody who's worse off than you, who's actually on the point of death. That wouldn't be right, would it? So these are the 3 rules. We'll carry on. I mean, it now goes slightly off piste a bit from eating meat, but he said a monk or a monastic who lives in dependence of a certain village or town, and his practice is loving kindness. He abides with loving kindness to all beings before him, behind him, etc. Then a householder comes to him and invites him for the next day's meal, and the monk, the monastic, accepts it if he likes. When the night is ended, in the morning, he dresses and, taking his bowl and outer robe, goes to the house of that householder and sits down on a seat made ready. The householder's son arrives and serves him with good food. He does not think, see, the monastic does not think, how good that householder serves me with good alms food. If only the householder might serve me with such good alms food in the future. He does not think thus. He eats that alms food without being tied to it, infatuated with it, and utterly committed to it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape from it. In other words, to renounce that greediness. So what do you think, Jivaka? Would that monastic on such an occasion choose for his own affliction, or for another's affliction, or for the affliction of both? So no, Venerable Sir. Does not that monastic sustain himself with blameless food on that occasion? Yes, Venerable Sir, I've heard this. Brahma abides in loving kindness. In other words, having developed that loving kindness, he's not going to be greedy. It undermines greed. The Blessed One is my visible witness to this. The Blessed One abides in loving kindness. And then, Jivaka, any lust, any hate, any delusion whereby ill will might arise has been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made a palm stump, done away with, so that they are no longer subject to future arising. If what you said referred to that, then I allow it to you. Yes, I referred to precisely that. So here we have teaching about not being greedy with food, not expecting the food to be always wonderful and the same, even if you cook it for yourself, not to get attached to food, and a statement about the Buddha himself that he doesn't suffer from greediness or anything like that. And then there's that repetition of that whole business of going to a householder's house, etc., etc. Then he says, and on that occasion, would he, on such an occasion, would his eating be blameless? So we can presume here that he's also been offered meat and so forth. So then he says, well, it's also said that Brahma abides in equanimity. So this is another quality that you have to develop in order to undermine greed, not become attached to it. Any lust, any hatred, any delusion whereby cruelty, discontent, or aversion might arise has been abandoned by the Tathagata. He's talking about himself now. So cruelty, of course, is the end is replaced by compassion, discontent by joy, and equanimity, aversion by equanimity. I had a little experience of this myself when I went to Sri Lanka. I went back to Sri Lanka. And I'd been in England for a little while, and I went to the International Buddhist Meditation Center, which is in Colombo, and was actually maybe built. I think it was built for the Mahasi in the middle 50s by the Bandra Nayakas, who were prime ministers then, and. Every day somebody would come and offer food. They had enough support for one particular family for about a month. So every day for a month, you would get people coming, you see. And I got it into my head as to why, they didn't serve me, being a Westerner, why they didn't serve me some Western food. And it became a sort of silly obsession in my head, you see, because I know that one dish that the Sri Lankans like is macaroni cheese. So I got into this, and slowly over a period of 4 or 5 days, or I got quite averse to the food that they were giving me. And I could hear this whinging mind, not this again, and all that sort of stuff going on, you see. And it got to a point where I suddenly realized, what am I doing? These people are offering me food. I'm not paying for it. I'm not, it's a gift. And here I am complaining, you see. So I began, of course, then to develop gratitude, you see. And as I developed the gratitude, it's wonderful how amazing the food began to taste. So your taste is actually, affected. Your taste buds, I think, are affected by how you feel towards the food or the people who are offering you the food. So these three things, you see, a sense of compassion for the person who's offering you the food, a sense of joy at receiving it, reciprocal joy, because it's also, in terms of an offering, if somebody invites you round for a meal, it's an offering to you. And they're joyful in offering it to you, and you rejoice in their joy. You're happy because they're happy. And underlying all that is this sense of equanimity so that you don't get greedy. Then there's a final a paragraph here concerning the slaughters. So if anyone slaughters a living being for the Tathagata or his disciple, and he lays up much demerit in 5 instances. When he says, go and fetch the living being. When the living being experiences pain and grief by being led with a neck halter. When he says, go and slaughter the living being. When the living being experiences pain and grief on being slaughtered. And when he provides the Tathagata or his disciples with food that is not permissible. These are the 5 things that bring much demerit in these 5 instances. So, and as he said, any of that point, somebody who recognized or realized what they're doing could stop, you see. As they call for the animal, they could then say, no, that wouldn't be right. I'm killing it purposely for these monastics. And so at each of those stages, they can stop. And each of those stages, if they stop, the earlier they stop, the less demerit, right? That's the idea of always splitting up an action. There was a lovely occasion at the Birmingham Buddhist Vihara where there was a few of us in the meditation hall. And the whole question of vegetarianism came up, you see. And in the East, or should we say, generally speaking, they make a clear distinction between the butcher who actually kills the meat and therefore must have aversion in their minds, and the people who eat it who haven't got aversion, they just got greed, right? So therefore, they're not so, they don't have so much demerit, should we say. So it's all right to eat meat, you see, because you didn't actually kill the animal. So, of course, we argued with Venerable Dr. Ivitadama, whom some of you, I'm sure, met, that, of course, every time you buy the meat, you're paying the butcher to kill another animal, right? I mean, the shelf has to be replenished in the shops. And it took him a long time, he wouldn't agree to that because of this fixation about the butcher is the one who really commits the deed and for which there's real bad news. But the person who eats the meat, well, he can just be greedy. He doesn't have to be greedy. I mean, after all, it's just dead meat. It's food. The connection between the buyer of the food and the butcher is just not there, you see. But eventually, we got through to him, I think, and he agreed that there was some connection there, you see, some karmic connection. Anyway, not long after that, I think it was probably the weekend, I had to go down to London with him. And we got there quite early and we went for a sort of brunch And we went to a little cafe that is near the Victoria bus station. And we walked in and we ordered breakfast, you see. And of course, I ordered vegetarian breakfast, and he ordered bacon, sausage, and eggs. And he gave me a very sheepish look, you know. So even though he had begun to understand there was some sort of connection there, he was still hanging on to the old ways of thinking about these things. So that does present us as Buddhists, you know, as followers of the Dharma, with some reflection there, you know. It's interesting that in Buddhist countries, if you are a butcher or a fisherman, you tend to be looked down upon because you kill meat, because you kill living beings, rather. And when I was told that in Sri Lanka, when the Christians came, it was easy to convert the fishermen along the seaboard because, of course, they said, well, Jesus caught fish. He actually helped people to catch fish. And so it alleviated them of this constant guilt. It's funny how, you know, it's easy to place the culpability on somebody else and make them feel completely guilty because you're eating the fish. So anyway, Jivaka then says that he wants to become a lay follower who's gone for refuge for life. Actually, this must be a little addition at the end because he's already become a follower. Jivaka actually became the main doctor, became the doctor for Bimbisara and for the Buddha. He was an extremely clever doctor. And what happened was, of course, you had to pay him, you see, when you were. And what happened was, because of his reputation, people who were ill would join the order, you see, join the order, and then say that, you know, express their sickness, tell them about their sickness, they get cured, and then they leave, you see. And Jivaka, of course, when he found this out, was asked the Buddha not to allow that. So there came a rule. There's a rule that you cannot enter the monastic order, the Buddhist monastic orders, if you're ill, if you've got an illness, right? I mean, I'm not talking about a cold or something, but some illness which needs to be cured, which can be cured. And eventually it's down to the group of monks or nuns, actually, as to whether they would let somebody in who has some physical disability of some sort. Not so much disability as an illness, yeah. Yeah. So I hope this has given you some food for thought. The Jivaka discourse on vegetarianism. I can only hope my words have been of some assistance, and that by your sincere effort and practice, you will become liberated sooner rather than later. So we can begin a little practice.